What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars sits down for what should be a routine morning show interview only to find himself facing a host determined to tear him down on live television? Tom Cruise thought he was walking into Good Morning America for a standard promotional chat about his latest Mission Impossible film. Instead, he found himself in a verbal battlefield with George Stephanopoulos, a confrontation so intense it would end with security escorting one of the most famous actors in the world off the set. Before we dive into this explosive encounter, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. What do you think really motivated George's aggressive approach that morning? The cameras rolled, and George Stephanopoulos flashed his practiced television smile. But there was something cold behind his eyes as he looked across at Tom Cruise. The interview was supposed to be straightforward, a simple promotional segment for the new Mission Impossible film. Tom had done thousands of these over his career, and he settled into his chair with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how these things went. "We're here with Tom Cruise, one of Hollywood's biggest stars," George began, his voice carrying that familiar morning show cadence. "Tom, thanks for being with us this morning." "Thanks for having me, George. Always a pleasure to be on Good Morning America," Tom replied with his trademark enthusiasm, that megawatt smile lighting up the studio. "I'm really excited to talk about this new film, the stunts we pulled off, the incredible locations. The whole team really outdid themselves." But George wasn't interested in letting Tom settle into his comfortable promotional rhythm. Instead of the expected follow-up about the film, George leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting to something more predatory. "Before we get to that, Tom, I think our viewers are more interested in hearing about some of the controversies that seem to follow you around. Your involvement with Scientology, for instance. How do you respond to critics who say you use your celebrity status to promote what many consider a dangerous cult?" The question hit like a sledgehammer. Tom's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he recovered, but George had clearly caught him off guard. This wasn't in the pre-in notes. This wasn't what they had discussed. "Well, George, I'd rather focus on the film today," Tom said diplomatically, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "I think your viewers tuned in to hear about Mission Impossible, not to rehash old tabloid stories." George's smile grew wider, and there was something almost gleeful about it. He had drawn first blood, and he wasn't about to let up. "Oh, but I think our viewers deserve honesty from their celebrities, don't you? You've been involved with this organization for decades. You've recruited other celebrities. Surely you can defend your choices to the American people." Tom's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He was still smiling, but anyone who knew him well could see the warning signs. His hands, which had been relaxed on the armrests, were now gripping them slightly. "George, with all due respect, I came here to promote a film that hundreds of people worked incredibly hard on. If you want to have a different conversation, maybe we should do that off camera." "But we're on camera now, Tom," George said, his voice taking on an almost mocking tone, "and I think it's a fair question. You've influenced a lot of people over the years. Don't you think you owe them some accountability?" The studio fell silent, except for the low hum of cameras and equipment. The production crew, who had expected a light promotional interview, were now watching what was clearly becoming a hostile interrogation. Tom could feel the energy in the room shift, could sense the cameras zooming in on his face, waiting to catch any crack in his composure. "Accountability for what, exactly?" Tom asked, his voice still controlled, but with an edge creeping in. "For making movies that entertain people. For doing my own stunts. For working with incredible filmmakers and actors. What exactly am I supposed to be accountable for, George?" George shuffled his notes theatrically, drawing out the moment. He was clearly enjoying this, feeding off the tension he had created. "Well, let's talk about those stunts, since you brought them up. Some people say your insistence on doing dangerous stunts yourself is just ego, that you're putting entire productions at risk because you can't accept that you're getting older. Insurance companies, stunt coordinators, your fellow actors, they all have to deal with the consequences of your need to be the hero. Isn't that a bit selfish?" Now Tom's smile disappeared entirely. The accusation that he was selfish, that he was putting others at risk, struck at the core of who he believed himself to be as a professional and as a person. His voice, when he spoke, was dangerously quiet. "George, I don't know what kind of interview you think you're conducting here, but that's completely out of line. I work with the best stunt coordinators in the world. Every safety precaution is taken. I train for months for these sequences. I would never ever put anyone else at risk. But you have put people at risk, haven't you?" George pressed on, consulting his notes again. "There have been delays, injuries, insurance claims. Your need to be Tom Cruise, action hero, has cost studios millions of dollars and put Cruise in danger. How do you justify that?" Tom stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. The sudden movement caused a stir among the crew, and cameras quickly adjusted to follow him. His face was flushed now, the careful media training of decades finally cracking under George's relentless assault. You know what, George, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've worked with the best people in this industry. People who trust me. People who know that I would never compromise their safety or the integrity of a production. I don't know what your agenda is here today, but this isn't journalism. This is a hit job. George leaned back in his chair, looking almost satisfied. He had gotten Tom Cruise, the ultimate professional, to lose his composure on live television. Mission accomplished. I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered. Tom, if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that says something about the questions themselves. Tom's hands were shaking slightly now, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline and anger. He had been ambushed on live television, and George Stephanopoulos was sitting there with that smug expression, acting like he had just performed some great service to journalism. The actor took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. But George wasn't finished. Tom, please sit down. We're not done here, George said with false concern, gesturing to the empty chair. I think our viewers deserve to hear your side of these important issues. Important issues. Tom's voice rose slightly, and he could hear the edge in it. George, you invited me here to talk about a movie that employs hundreds of people, that took 3 years to make, that audiences are excited to see. Instead, you're sitting there trying to tear me down with tabloid gossip and twisted facts. George's expression hardened. The mask of television professionalism was slipping, revealing something uglier underneath. Tabloid gossip. Tom, I'm talking about documented incidents. I'm talking about public statements you've made. I'm talking about an organization that has been criticized by former members, by families, by law enforcement. Are you saying none of that matters? What I'm saying, Tom replied, his voice getting stronger, is that you're a journalist, George, or, at least you're supposed to be. Where's your objectivity? Where's your fairness? You've already made up your mind about me before I even sat down in that chair. The cameras were capturing every moment, every micro-expression. The control room was in chaos with producers frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue. This was exactly the kind of drama that could generate headlines for weeks. But it was also potentially television for everyone involved. George straightened in his chair, his voice taking on a lecturing tone that made Tom's jaw clench. Tom, my job is to hold public figures accountable. You can't just walk onto television, promote your products, and expect softball questions. The American people have a right to know who they're supporting with their entertainment dollars. The American people, Tom repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. You think you speak for the American people? You think they tune in to Good Morning America to watch you ambush guests with loaded questions and personal attacks? I think they tune in for honesty, George shot back. Something that seems to be in short supply when it comes to certain Hollywood celebrities. That was the final straw. Tom stepped closer to George's desk, leaning forward with an intensity that made the veteran journalist instinctively lean back. You want honesty? George, here's some honesty for you. I've spent my entire career trying to entertain people, to give them escape, to make them feel something. I've worked with thousands of talented people, supported countless charities, and, yes, I've made personal choices about my beliefs and my life. But you know what I've never done? I've never sat across from someone on television and tried to destroy them for sport. George's composure was starting to crack now. He hadn't expected Tom to fight back this hard, this eloquently. The script, in his head, where Tom would stumble and fumble under pressure, wasn't playing out the way he had imagined. Tom, I'm not trying to destroy anyone, I'm doing my job. Your job, Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your job is to inform people, not to tear them down. Your job is to be fair, not to set traps. Your job is to serve your audience, not your own ego. The accusation about ego hit home, and George's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being called out so directly, especially not on his own show, in front of his own cameras. How dare you question my integrity? George said, his voice rising. I've been doing this for decades. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, people who actually matter. Don't lecture me about journalism. People who actually matter, Tom repeated, his voice dangerous. Quiet again. So I don't matter. The people who watch my movies don't matter. The crews who work on my films don't matter. Only the people you deem worthy of respect matter. George realized his mistake immediately, but it was too late. The words were out there, captured on live television, and Tom Cruise was not going to let him walk them back. That's not what I meant, George said quickly. But his damage control sounded weak even to his own ears. No, I think that's exactly what you meant, Tom continued. I think you've decided that because I'm an actor. Because I make movies for a living. Because I entertain people instead of sitting behind a news desk. That somehow makes me less important, less deserving of basic respect. The studio had gone completely silent now. Even the camera operators seemed transfixed by what was unfolding. This wasn't just a celebrity losing his temper. This was a masterclass in turning the tables, and Tom was just getting started. No, what's really interesting, George, You keep talking about accountability, about holding people responsible for their actions. But what about your accountability? What about your responsibility as a journalist? To be fair, to be honest, to treat your guests with basic human decency. George opened his mouth to respond, but Tom wasn't finished. When was the last time you asked yourself whether you were serving your audience or just serving your own need to feel important? When was the last time you considered that? Maybe, just maybe, your job isn't to tear people down, but to lift them up, to inform rather than destroy. I don't have to listen to this, George said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was trapped now, caught between his desire to end this disaster and his inability to admit defeat on his own show. Actually, you do have to listen to this, Tom replied, because unlike you, I'm not hiding behind loaded questions and false righteousness. I'm telling you exactly what I think, directly, honestly. Isn't that what you said you wanted? Honesty. George looked around desperately, seeking help from his producers, but they were all frozen watching this unprecedented meltdown unfold. The seasoned journalist who had interviewed some of the most powerful people in the world was being systematically dismantled by an actor, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Tom, I think we should take a commercial break. George, finally, managed. Oh no, Tom said, shaking his head. You wanted to do this on live television, George? You wanted the cameras rolling when you tried to humiliate me. So, let's keep those cameras rolling now. George's face had gone from red to pale, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead under the hot studio lights. He was completely out of his element now, facing an opponent who had not only refused to be intimidated, but had turned the entire confrontation around. The veteran journalist who had spent decades controlling interviews, guiding conversations, and maintaining his authority, was watching it all crumble in real time. Tom, please, let's just move on to the film, George said weakly. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late for that kind of retreat. Move on. Tom's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and righteous anger. You think you can spend the last 10 minutes trying to destroy my reputation, attack my beliefs, question my professionalism, insult my intelligence, and then just move on? That's not how this works, George. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of George's obvious discomfort. His usual commanding presence had evaporated, replaced by the fidgeting movements of someone who desperately wanted to be anywhere else. He kept glancing toward the control room, silently pleading for someone to cut to commercial. But the producers were transfixed by the drama unfolding before them. You know what I find most disturbing about all of this? Tom continued, beginning to pace slightly behind his chair. It's not just that you ambushed me. It's not just that you tried to humiliate me on live television. It's that you thought you could get away with it. You thought I would just sit there and take it because that's what you're used to. Celebrities who are so desperate for promotion that they'll let you walk all over them. George tried to interrupt. Tom, I never intended to. Don't. Tom cut him off sharply. Don't you dare try to backtrack now. You came into this studio today with a plan. George, you had your little gotcha questions all prepared. You were going to be the tough journalist who took down Tom Cruise, weren't you? You were going to show everyone how fearless you are, how willing you are to ask the hard questions. The truth of Tom's words was written all over George's face. The carefully crafted ambush was being exposed for exactly what it was, and there was nowhere for the host to hide. But here's what you didn't count on, Tom continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. You didn't count on me fighting back. You didn't count on me calling you out for your unprofessional behavior. You didn't count on the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I might be smarter than you gave me credit for. George made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Tom, I'm going to have to ask you to what? Tom interrupted. Believe. To stop embarrassing you on your own show. To pretend that what just happened here didn't happen. The actor moved closer to George's desk again, but this time there was no aggression in his posture. Just a calm, confident authority that made his words even more devastating. Let me tell you something about the real world, George. In the real world, when you treat people with disrespect, there are consequences. In the real world, when you abuse your position and your platform, people notice. In the real world, actions have repercussions. George's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He had completely lost control of his own show, and worse, he was being lectured about professionalism by the very person he had tried to ambush. You want to talk about accountability? Tom's voice rose again. Let's talk about your accountability. How do you explain to your bosses that you turned what should have been a simple promotional interview into a hostile interrogation? How do you explain to your viewers that you used their trust in you to pursue some personal vendetta? How do you explain to yourself that you forgot what journalism is supposed to be about? The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the technical crew had stopped their usual movements, frozen by the intensity of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown or a talk show gone wrong. This was a complete role rehearsal, with the guest holding the host accountable in ways that George had clearly never experienced. You know what the saddest part about all of this is? Tom asked, his voice dropping to a more conversational tone. That somehow made his words even more impactful. I actually respected you once. I thought you were a real journalist, someone who cared about truth, about fairness, about serving your audience. But what I see sitting across from me now is just another television personality who confused having a platform with having wisdom. George's hands were visibly shaking now as he shuffled his notes, trying to find some way to salvage the situation. But Tom wasn't done. And the really tragic thing is that there are important stories out there. George, there are real issues that need to be addressed, real injustices that need to be exposed, real questions that need to be asked. But instead of using your position to shine a light on those things, you chose to use it for this cheap ambush, this pathetic attempt to boost your own profile by tearing down someone else. The veteran journalist finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Tom, I think we need to end this interview. Oh, now you want to end it. Tom laughed, but again, there was no humor in it. Now that you're the one being held accountable, now that you're the one being asked the hard questions, suddenly you want to end it. How convenient. George looked desperately toward the control room again, and this time, he made a cutting motion across his throat, the universal signal to end the broadcast. But Tom saw it and shook his head. No, George, you don't get to cut away now. You wanted to do this on live television, remember, you wanted the drama, you wanted the confrontation, you wanted to make a show out of it. So, let's give your viewers the full show. The actor turned slightly to address the cameras directly, his voice taking on the tone of someone speaking to friends, rather than the hostile interrogation tone that had dominated the interview. Ladies and gentlemen, watching at home, what you've just witnessed is exactly what happens when journalism loses its way, when entertainment becomes more important than information, when gotcha moments become more important than truth, when personal agendas become more important than public service. George made one final desperate attempt to assert his authority. Tom, I'm the host of this show, and I'm telling you that this interview is over. Tom turned back to him with a look that could have frozen fire. You're right about one thing, George. This interview is over, but not because you're ending it. It's over because I'm walking away from it. There's a difference. The actor straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera one more time. To anyone watching who was looking forward to hearing about the new Mission Impossible film, I apologize that you didn't get that today. That wasn't my choice. But I promise you this, the movie was made with the same integrity and professionalism that I tried to bring to this interview, and I hope you'll judge it on its own merits rather than on this unfortunate display of what passes for journalism these days. With that, Tom Cruise began walking toward the exit, leaving George Stephanopoulos sitting alone at his desk, looking smaller and more defeated than anyone had ever seen him on television. The cameras followed Tom's exit, capturing his confident stride, his head held high, completely in control, despite having just been through what should have been a career-damning ordeal. As Tom reached the edge of the set, George called out one last time, his voice cracking with desperation. Tom, wait, can't we just? Tom stopped and turned back, and for a moment it looked like he might return to finish the conversation. Instead, he simply said, George, the next time you want to interview someone, try remembering that they're a human being first and a story second. Maybe then you'll remember what journalism is supposed to be about. And with that, Tom Cruise walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving behind one of the most devastating takedowns in television history and a host whose reputation would never quite recover from the encounter. The cameras finally cut to commercial, but the damage was done. The ambush had backfired spectacularly, and everyone who witnessed it knew they had just seen something unprecedented. What did you think of George Stephanopoulos' hostile approach to this interview? Was he trying to do legitimate journalism, or was this just a cheap attempt to create drama? Let me know in the comments below.